So hey everybody, welcome. My name's Mary Magellan. If you don't know me, I'm based over in Oakland, California in the Bay Area. Here's a little bit more about me. I'm not going to go into the slideshow presentation of this deck. I hope that's okay with you all, just because I've got 3 monitors and it's going to get a little unwieldy. But basically, I've been a consultant and M365 freelancer working across many different industries, from government, nonprofit, retail, real estate, healthcare, tech, since 2014. So a lot of the trainings that I've led at the beginning were advanced Excel classes, then moved into SharePoint, and now have been moving into the PowerApps space. So I've been doing a number of Power Automate and some PowerApps training for some pretty big clients and companies. So that's just a little bit more about me. In my spare time, I am an avid tennis player, and I love to dance, and I love to eat every single food under the sun and travel. That's, if I'm not online, then I'll be playing tennis or traveling usually. So what to expect in the session? I think we've probably got a mixture of levels, but also because all of us are PowerApps folks, I think we're going to go a little bit faster through some of the introduction concepts to Power Automate. But stop me at any time, ask questions, just jump in. And it might be something that I have to parking lot and follow up with you later, or we can brainstorm and talk through it together as a group. I've got tons of resources, and I will upload those into the team, which, speaking of, let's all get into the team right now. So this is going to be a hands-on session today. We've got 2 hours, so I want you all to follow along with me, ask questions as you go, try things out. So I'll go at a little bit of a slower pace, as I know that you might have multiple screens up and be trying things out while you're watching my screen. So let's just start off with the basics. What is Power Automate? So Power Automate is part of your Microsoft suite, part of the Power Apps or the Power Platform suite, and Microsoft created it to be a workflow tool. So for us to connect and automate, routine, repetitive things that we do on a day-to-day basis. Similar to Power Apps, Microsoft markets Power Automate as a low to no code solution. However, I will say that once you want to start doing some kind of more custom workflows or some more complexity, you do need to know some code. It definitely helps to be familiar with some formulas and functions in Excel. Some of those come over into the Power Automate environment, and you'll probably see some similarities with the functions and the code that you're creating in Power Apps with Power Automate. So I'll be interested to hear all of your ideas as we start getting into some of that. Examples of what you could create flows for, the sky's kind of the limit, but for most of the clients that I work with, they are just enabling Microsoft workflows within their environments for security and compliance, but you can technically connect APIs, third-party apps into these flows as well. But setting up notifications, so like a really classic example, somebody adds a new item into a SharePoint list, somebody drops the file or modifies something in a document library in SharePoint, and certain people need to be notified about that, especially when we're juggling so many things inside a team. So notifications, collecting or spitting out data, whether that's into a SharePoint list or an Excel spreadsheet, that's something you can do. Approvals is a really big request that I get from folks that they want to use Power Automate for. I submit a document into the folder, and I need certain managers to approve it, and it needs to go through various processes. So those are a couple examples of what we can do with Power Automate. Let's jump into the environment and kind of explore what it looks like. So go ahead and launch it. If you're in office.com, if you're in Teams, you should be able to click on the waffle icon. Actually, if you go back to your office.com, click on the waffle, find Power Automate. It's that blue right arrow kind of icon right there. Go ahead and launch it. You're going to get a bunch of pop-ups when you jump into Power Automate for the first time, just like all of the Microsoft tools. So I'll give you a quick overview of the interface before we jump into building some flows. You've got the homepage, which has got a lot of, like Microsoft marketing tools on it. There's some Microsoft built-in tutorials here, so you can definitely jump in and dive a little bit deeper with some of these things. Over on the left-hand side, your main navigation bar. So you've got an approval center. If you start using approvals workflows, you'll start seeing approvals showing up here. And
hey, if you're getting anything helpful out of this, a comment or even a like really helps the channel, and lets people like you know this is good content. Much appreciated.
I click on my history. You can see I was testing out a lot of approvals. So you're going to get a lot of data in here about the approval name, when it was sent, who sent it, when it was completed, etc. We'll look at some of those a little bit later in the session today. Also, over in the left navigation bar, go ahead and click on My Flows. So that's where you manage all of your workflows. This is typically where I'm in most of the time. You can see that you can select a workflow over to the left-hand side of it. And I was playing around with some PowerApps, Power Automate integration today that we'll talk about towards the end of the session. But you'll notice that when you select a workflow, there's tons of little tools over on the right-hand side. So not only can you run this workflow, you've got your editing tools. This is a share icon. So Power Automate is also supposed to be collaborative, especially if you're creating a workflow that affects an entire project team or department and you go on vacation. You definitely want to make sure you're not the only owner of that flow. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to fix things if you're, out of town or have left your position. So definitely want to think about, sharing who should have access to these flows. Also clicking on the three dots to the right. You've got all sorts of fun features back here. We can cover more of these a little bit later. Up at the top of My Flows, you can quickly create new flows up here. There are also tons of templates. So I typically recommend when you're getting started with Power Automate, check out some of the templates to get an idea for what you can do. And a lot of times Microsoft has built the whole thing for you, and you might just need to customize it a little bit as you get started. So it's kind of a good way to start learning about how these flows are created. And I'll show you a couple templates in a minute. And then you can create flows from scratch. Today, we'll talk about these three different types of flows: automated, instant, and scheduled cloud flows. So let's talk a little bit more about the flow types we've got here. And to show you these flow types a little bit more, I'm going to click on the create area. And Microsoft always does this. They give us many ways to do the same thing. So you can build a flow from My Flows area. You can click on the create area. You can click on the templates area to do a lot of the same features. So I'm just clicking over to the create. And up at the top, you're going to see, I'd say, 95% of the time, folks are using these three types of flows. Let's just talk about the differences. So there might be some new vocabulary in here. Stop me if something is confusing or you need clarification what it means. Automated cloud flow, it's triggered automatically. So you've got triggers in a flow that is, how does this automation know to begin? So typically a trigger might be a file's dropped into a folder, or a new member is added to a team, or an email lands in my inbox or in a certain subfolder in my inbox. That could be an example of a trigger, and then the flow begins automatically. An instant cloud flow is where you have to push a button. So you get to decide when you want the flow to run. You create a button, you press it. Usually I see a lot of end users using this on their mobile phone. On my phone, I've got these little instant cloud flows. I just launched the Power Automate app. And so the first one, I'll show it to you on my screen in a minute, is just set a reminder. So I press a button, and in 10 minutes, it gives me a little alarm to remind me of whatever I need to do in 10 minutes. So that would be like a really simple example of an instant cloud flow. And we'll do some exercises with these as well today. Scheduled cloud flow. Pretty straightforward. You need to send your team a daily update on all of your new SharePoint list items every Wednesday at 8 a.m. So you just schedule that Cloudflow and it runs every, like clockwork, every Wednesday at 8 in the morning. Check out down below, we've got templates. You can also find a bunch of these templates over in the left navigation bar in the templates area. But you'll notice that there's a couple really easy instant flows that we can just set up through a template. So follow up on a message. Let's just check out one of these and see how easy they are. If you're following along with me, feel free to try this. Click on the follow up on a message, and you'll notice the icons here are telling you what data connectors are part of this flow. So we've got Teams, you've got your Office profile, and you've got this delay icon. So it's going to be sent on kind of a delayed timer. If I select it, the first step is Power Automate's connecting to your data sources, or what is called connectors, and you'll also see connectors over here. So as you start creating more flows and connecting to SharePoint, Excel, Outlook, etc., you can manage all of those connectors over here. All you have to do is hit Create Flow. If you're using Power Automate for the first time, it'll want you to log in with your M365 account. If you hit Create, it'll do that for you automatically. And that's it. This one didn't require me to do anything besides hit Create Flow. So let's see what happened here. You're going to get this pop-up until you decide not to see it again. This flow, as soon as you create something, is automatically running. You don't have to turn it on. You don't have to hit activate or anything. It just starts automatically in the background. So I'm just going to get rid of that. We're now on the details screen of this flow. If you want to jump in and see, how did this flow get built? You're going to go up to the left-hand corner. and hit edit. I always recommend renaming these flows so they make sense to you, and also exploring what the heck just happened back behind the scenes. So when I hit edit, this is actually like a pretty lengthy flow. We've got a number of different things happening in here. The trigger is always the first step of every flow. And in this case, we were doing an instant cloud flow. So when I click a button for a selected message in Teams, there's going to be some variables initialized. We've got a couple conditions happening here. We've got a time zone step coming in here and converting to that user's time zone so that we can follow up on this message. It's collecting some of my Office profile data. And if you click in any of these steps, you're going to get more details back here. I'm not going to go into depth about this right now, but we're going to go through this as we start building our own flows shortly. But let me just show you how like this follow-up on a message flow is actually activated. If I jump over into Teams, remember that was an instant cloud flow. So if someone sends me a chat message, like I see this message from Amer, if I hover over his message, you're going to want to click on the command buttons inside of Teams to activate these reminders in Teams, and that's the 3 dots. You hover over somebody's chat message, click on the 3 dots. Sometimes it'll populate right away. You just have to give it a second. And did you all just see it quickly kind of flashed in front of me? And there's that automation that we just activated. So that one is just a super simple one that, Microsoft just kind of does on its own. I don't really have to do anything else besides click follow up on a message. And it also creates an adaptive card. So this is all created back in the flow. This is stuff that you can customize back in Power Automate if you want to get really slick, as Kurt would say. But here I'm just going to go in and fill in some information. So on the 15th, go ahead and notify me at how about 3 p.m. Remind me to send Amer my video tutorial on SharePoint lists or something like that. SharePoint list automation. So at 3 p.m., I'll be getting a notification inside of Teams about that. You'll also see that, and I recommend you all do this, you can add in Power Automate inside of Teams. So you'll notice that I'm getting Power Automate bots that are coming in here, sending me notifications when certain automations happen. I'll show you all how to set these up shortly, but just check this out. When I click on my Power Automate chat area, I'm getting all sorts of notifications here. I set up a flow where it's sending me some data about a SharePoint list getting updated. It's letting me know that I just created that automation with a reminder message. So that's the Power Automate bot. And you can add Power Automate into your Teams environment by just clicking on the 3 dots over on the left and doing a search for Power Automate and adding it in here. Also, as you start creating more flows, if you are using the chat bot inside of your flows, which we'll do today, you'll see that it will automatically just show up in your chat window as well. But if you actually want to manage your flows within Teams, really making it a one-stop shop, then you can add Power Automate in there as well. So I set up a little project team for all of us, like a sandbox environment, if you will, to play around in today. And when new members of this team get added, like I just added Nick into the team, or Kurt, I've created a workflow that sends each new member a message. So I think this is pretty cool, quick template you can use from Power Automate. Again, I work with a lot of clients that are in Teams all the time. And if a new person comes on or multiple people come on every month, instead of, retyping or copying and pasting from OneNote or Word or Outlook that message to welcome that new member, why not just automate that, make it a little bit faster for you? So let me show you all how I created this automation.
Yeah.
And you can watch this and then we'll do some hands-on after this one. So I'm going to jump back into Power Automate and I'm going to go over to my templates. And again, this is where I recommend getting started if you're learning about Power Automate, just to kind of see some of the capability and how things are built. And then you can start building things from scratch when you get more comfortable with it. You're going to see tons of different workflows in here. A lot of them are not going to be applicable to us depending on your security features and the environment that you're using. For example, you really want to be careful of flows that look like this. save Outlook.com email attachments to your OneDrive. So let me do a search up at the top. Let's say I did want to create a flow that moved attachments from Outlook to my OneDrive without me having to move it manually. I'll type in Outlook up at the top and I'll type in OneDrive. So this is what I recommend. When you know the tools you want to connect, just search for them in the templates area, hit enter. I just want to show you how it can be a little bit tricky inside of the world of Power Automate. These two flows look almost identical, but one will not work for the majority of users. So most people don't have an Outlook.com account. If you're working in a business, you've got an Office 365 account. So you don't want to be using any flows that use Outlook.com. Most people, if they're working in a business, are using OneDrive for Business. They're not using a personal OneDrive account. Personal OneDrive is your free account through Microsoft that might be connected to Gmail or Yahoo or something. So again, I always want to point this out to my learners, especially, when I'm talking to folks that are within a corporation, that you need to be careful about which connectors you're choosing from these templates, because if you choose the wrong ones, the flow's not going to work. And I've seen people, I've done it myself, spend an hour trying to figure out why it's not working. And it had to do with the connector. I chose the wrong one. Yeah, and the icons are identical too. So you really got to pay attention to the text here. So the flow I created inside of Teams, I just did a search for Teams and the word welcome. And there's this automated cloud flow. So it happens automatically and it welcomes new team members. And I click on it. I'm connecting to Teams and an Office 365 users account. I continue. And in this template example, it's kind of giving me a shortcut. It just wants to know, hey, what's the team I want to monitor for new members? And here's a message that we're going to throw in. And you can customize the message if you want. I always recommend, if you see kind of these drop-down fields, to bypass this step. This is kind of like a shortcut. But I always recommend that folks click on Edit in Advanced Mode so you can see all of your possible features that you have access to so that you don't miss anything. So again, I'm going to bypass all of these. It's really easy to do, to click on these drop downs and select it. But I highly encourage you always to go into Edit in Advanced Mode. So I'm going to do that. Before we get into the steps, one of the most important best practices, rename your flows, because as you start creating more, it's going to get confusing what's what. So give these unique names. So maybe it's, welcome my Power Labs Automate team members or something like that. So you just type over, it auto saves for you. All right, so the first step of this flow is the trigger. How does the flow know to begin? When a new team member is added, and this is a really simple drop-down field, what team am I monitoring? And I just click here and grab the team that you're monitoring. If maybe you were monitoring a SharePoint site and it didn't have a Teams interface, you can go into Add a Custom Item, and you'd be able to copy and paste the SharePoint site URL into Add a Custom Item. So there's always customizations back here. Not going to do the customizations yet. We'll get there. All right, so I'm monitoring this team. The next step, so each of these blocks are called steps in Power Automate. So after the trigger are your actions. So the first action is collecting user information from that new team member. And these boxes that you see here are what are called dynamic content in Power Automate. They're parameters. They are collecting information from previous steps in your flow. So when that team member is added, it's collecting all of their user information, their email, their city, their office, their position, all that good stuff. So this is just their user ID. It's a unique number. And then I'm going down to the next action, and let's post a message to welcome that specific person. And here we've got some handy features. So post as. If you post it as the flow bot, let me click on the drop down so you can see the options here. Zoom in. All right, so we're looking at post as. If you post as the flow bot, what's going to happen is a message is going to show up in Teams coming from the Power Automate bot. It looks pretty impersonal. That could be useful when you just want to chug out information. But if you're welcoming somebody, you probably want to be a bit more personal and actually have them think that it's coming from you and you're spending some time creating a nice welcome message. So I'm going to post this as me, the user, Mary. I'm going to post this in the team channel for all the team members to see, and I'm just going to simply click on the drop downs and select the team and the channel. Power Automate is the team name, and the channel is going to be the general channel. To check out the message that's already been created for us, by all means, definitely use. I'm not good with HTML. It's one thing I need to get better at, but I can see that if you are fluent in HTML, it's going to make sense for you to click on that and start, really formatting this message a little bit better. I'm going to tell you right now that this job title, this is an example of dynamic content, is going to look weird when it posts in the team's message. It's going to be a random number that doesn't make sense to us. So let's pretend that, we tested this out, we saw that, and I want to fix this dynamic content. I'm going to hit the X to the right of it, remove it. And while I'm clicked in the message, let's say I want this to say, welcome so-and-so who will be joining from, I want the city in there. So from city office location or something like that. So here I'm going to insert dynamic content that's going to pull the city of that user that just joined us. To insert dynamic content or parameters, you're going to see these little icons showing up here. These are your parameters or dynamic content. These are your expressions. I have turned on the experimental features, so my screen might look a little different than yours. This icon used to just automatically show up as like a pop-up box. As soon as you click in a message, it just pops up in front of you, or it would show up as little blue text down here that would actually say the word dynamic content as a hyperlink. Microsoft has just been changing it every so often. So just be aware of that. When I click on that dynamic content feature, here are my variables or parameters. So I want to grab the office location of this user profile, and that's going to be the city. But you can see here's all the data that's getting pulled in from that get user profile step up above. And this is where Power Automate can become a low to no code solution. I am simply just grabbing information and not having to actually code it all in there. So I'll select city there. From city office location, okay, I'll delete that part. Let's say the rest of it looks good to me. I could add in a subject line. So here's an example of some features that the edit in advanced mode's giving me that I wouldn't see if I just bypassed that and done the quick view at the beginning. I wouldn't have gotten that subject line. I'm just going to hit save. If you want to peek at the code behind these steps that you're creating, you can click on each individual step over on the right side. And you can go down to peek at code. Now you cannot edit this, it's read only. Okay. But you can at least see what's going on behind the scenes, which I know Kurt and Darren, you're gonna be interested in. All right, so when you've created a flow, by the way, I recommend build them in pieces, go slowly, create a couple steps, test it out, make sure it works, create a couple others, combine them slowly, because similar to PowerApps, you build one huge long thing and something breaks or it doesn't work, and it's really can be difficult to figure out where it went wrong. So once you've created something, you're going to get some hints up at the top. Flow is ready to go, so that's giving me a success sign. I always recommend if you have any errors or warnings, they're going to show up in the flow checker. You'll get a little red dot next to the flow checker. You can click on that and that will show you stuff. I'm going to hit test up at the top. First time I'm testing this, I've got to do it manually. So I've got to actually add a new team member to the team. So I'll click and test this out. Now we already have this flow actually created. So now I've got 2 of them running, which is not ideal. So before the session, I already created this flow for us, just so it would be kind of a cool thing that you all could see when you join the team. But I've just created the same flow twice. Right. Okay. So we're basically going to have 2 flows running. We're going to get 2 messages every time one person joins the team. Okay. So I'm going to turn off one of the flows. And this will be important to do as you start building more flows. It'll get confusing if you have like lots of notifications coming and you don't know what's what. So if you're creating copies of things and then creating templates, turn off the stuff you're not using. you're just going to select it, or you can click on the three dots to the right and go to turn off. I'm going to get grayed out. All right, so this is the flow that's running. I'm going to click back in there and go into the edit menu. So while you're in testing mode, if you're in the edit menu, you'll see that spinner thing, and you can actually watch the flow run as you're going through it. So I'm just going to go into the team and let's add in another member. How about Annabelle? And so I just added a new member that should trigger this flow. And probably because I stepped out of the flow and jumped back in, we're not going to see it. But if I hadn't exited the flow and come back in, we would actually see the flow running on my screen right now. I'm going to go back out of this flow, and sometimes flows take a little bit to kick in. Power Automate does some processing stuff that can slow it down. Sometimes when you create a flow for the first time, it can take a couple triggers for it to kick in, from what I've noticed. But down below is where you're going to be able to monitor the different runs of your flow. And remember, I clicked test, and then I'm running a test. So I'll also be able to see information about what was a test versus what was an actual business process that was happening when I wasn't testing the flow. Now it doesn't. I'm going to refresh my screen, see if that wants to update. Okay, we're just going to let it do its thing. And I want to continue on and go to another flow that I want us all to work on now. So we'll come back to this, but you'll just trust me on this one. It should be working. Just being a bit slow right now. So in our team, I've created a SharePoint list for all of us. It's called Customers List. It's under the general channel. And I want us all to create a flow that's really popular that I see a lot of people wanting to do. You're managing a SharePoint list or maybe a document library, and you want to send a custom email notification to a couple of managers when a new item gets added. So if I jump back in this customers list, if it wants to load, if you check out that customers list, there's a bunch of customers in there. So we're going to create a custom email that gets sent to us if someone adds in a new item, and then I'll have you all go in and add in a new item to that list. So let's jump over into Power Automate and create a brand new flow. Go over to your left navigation bar and hit create. We'll create this flow from scratch. Let's get away from the templates now and start seeing how to build these from the beginning. Somebody let me know, what type of flow is this going to be? Automated, instant, or scheduled? When a colleague adds a new list item.
It's going to be automated.
Yep. That'll automatically trigger an event. So go ahead and click on automated. I don't like this preview screen. I typically hit skip here just because it gives you limited options, and I always like to see everything I've got access to, but you could technically go in here, give your flow your custom name, and choose the trigger from here. But I want to show you guys all of the features, so let's just go ahead and skip and bypass the screen and get into the meat. Okay, so what's the trigger going to be? Well, it's when a new item is going to be created in a SharePoint list. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is search for the connector that you want to trigger this flow. So I'm going to type in SharePoint. Now, this is sometimes what trips people up. Sometimes people think, well, why aren't you typing in Teams? That list lives inside of a team. Or sometimes if I've worked with clients and they want a notification anytime someone adds a file to this team channel, they think the connector should be Teams. But the key thing to remember is that Teams is run by SharePoint. So SharePoint is the actual connector when it comes to dealing with document libraries and SharePoint lists. They all live back in SharePoint. When I type in SharePoint, I'm just going to select the icon here, and I want to show you all that every connector has its own custom triggers and custom actions here. So if I typed in Outlook, we'd get a totally different set of triggers showing up here. So it's good to start exploring kind of what's available to you for each of these apps. In this case, for SharePoint, we want to select when a new item is created, but you'll see there's also a created or modified. Some of these features are getting deprecated, which means Microsoft is going to replace them with something else, or has already been replaced. Who knows when it's actually going to get dissolved by Microsoft, but they're kind of hanging out there still. Some of these triggers are collecting properties properties of the flat file, but not the actual file itself. So you want to be careful when you're picking. Sometimes you pick the properties and you're not going to get the right actions that you need later. So we'll look at some of that. I'm just going to choose the first one when an item is created, and I'm going to select the SharePoint address, which is my team name, PowerAutomate, and then the lists will auto-populate once you choose your site address. So this time we're selecting customer list. You always have advanced options typically under these steps. Lots of times these have to do with adding in additional filters or validation parameters and rules. I'm going to skip these for now, but we'll come back to them. And the next step is when a file is created, what do I want to do? Well, I want to send a message to some managers. So I'm going to go into New Step, and let's look at how to send a custom email. I'll search for Outlook as my connector. And make sure you're not choosing office.com. You're choosing Office 365 Outlook. So I've already selected the trigger. So notice down below, we are in the actions. Once the trigger is activated, what action happens as a result? And I want to send an email. If you see the versions, again, Microsoft making updates, so you always want to choose the latest version, version 2, version 3, whatever the biggest number is. So I'm going to select send an email v2. All right, and I'm just going to send this to myself for now. So put in your email address, add in a subject line, let's say new customer added to our list. And under the body, let's say I want that customer's name to show up in my email. So I'll say new customer is, and I'll insert some dynamic content. Click on my dynamic content little button in the top right corner. And look at the parameters that are collected here for when an item is created. So this is pulling parameters from previous steps. We only have one previous step so far, which is the trigger. So when that item is added into the list, it's collecting all of that data, all of that column information about that customer. So I'll just grab their first name, space, and add in their last name. And maybe I want to know the office location they're in this office. And I'll put in their location too. All right, so that's all I'm going to do for this one. If you go down to show advanced options. So Nick, I know you were talking about, with PowerApps, how do I send an email with CC fields? In Power Automate, they make it pretty easy for you. They've got those fields already built in under the advanced options. You've got attachments here, as well as the CC and the BCC fields that you could add in those extra things, as well as email importance and other features back here. So I'm just going to hit save. Let's test that out. Go to test, and you'll want to give it a try. Go into the customers list if you're there with me. Add in yourself as a customer. You don't have to fill in all of the data, but put your first and last name and an office location in there for me. Say I'm in Toronto, and I'll just hit save. So that should trigger the flow to run. Let me just show you all that once your flow has run successfully, I'm now in the output screen. So I'm back in the flow for the simple SharePoint list item, and you'll see that this is a great tool for troubleshooting. So if your flow breaks, you're going to see a red X next to the step where it doesn't work. And you can actually click into each of these steps after your flow is run, and you can see all of the inputs that came in and all of the outputs as well. So if I click on send an email, I can see, this was sent to my email address and it successfully occurred. Now we'll get into some conditions next, and that's when the outputs are going to be really useful, because you can start diving into, well, was this condition true or was this false, and what actually happened? So I'm going to go back in and edit this flow. And I want to make it a little bit more precise. So I don't want to get a notification anytime somebody adds in an item. I want to get a notification anytime a specific column is updated. So for example, if the office column changes, then send me a notification. So let's get a little bit more granular here. So I'm going to go back into the flow, and I'm going to add in a new step in between when an item is created and sending an email. So I'm going to hover over the steps and add the plus sign. And I'm going to add in a new action. And this time I want to monitor changes that happen to these SharePoint items. So this is going to be another SharePoint action. So I'm searching the SharePoint connector. And I'm going to type in the word get. So I'm looking for an action called get changes for an item or file. So this is going to allow me to monitor all of the changes that are happening in my SharePoint list and create a condition that, hey, if the office column value changes, then let's send a notification to somebody. So I'm going to select the get changes and follow the field process. Pick your SharePoint site, pick the customers list library. So under the ID, oh, by the way, so I've got my experimental features turned on. So if my screen looks different than yours, that's why. And let me show you how to turn on those features. So in the top right corner, under your settings, and then go to view all Power Automate settings. You can change your language, your time zone, and you can turn on those experimental features. This is really useful when we start building expressions with longer lines of code and functions. You're going to need the experimental features turned on because it all gets cut off in the old version. All right, so for the ID, if I click on my dynamic content, I am selecting the ID for that item that was added into the SharePoint list. So that's just the ID dynamic content. The since window, so what's going to happen here is I'm going to choose a dynamic content related to my SharePoint connector. And this is called a trigger token. And let me close out of that window so you guys can see. We're going to select a trigger window start token. So what this does is it's monitoring all of the changes that happened since the last flow run. And it's just monitoring if there's been a change since the flow has run. So you've got a start and an end token. I'm going to choose the trigger window start token. All right. So all this is doing, again, is just monitoring changes. And if I hit save and just test this out right now, let me retest it on the previous run that I just did. So I'll go back into test, and I will click on automatic and test it on a recent trigger. And so if I click into the outputs for the get changes, you're going to see that there's an ID number, 105, and under the outputs, you've got has column change, has column change, has column change for each of these columns. And you're seeing no, 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 until there should be a yes statement at some point in here. So this is going to allow us to then use a condition after this to say, okay, if the office column has changed, then let's send a notification. Interesting, they're all no's. Okay, well, we'll see. It shouldn't be no's, but let's take a look. So I'm going to go back in and edit this, and I'm going to add in a condition now. So after the get changes for an item or file, I'm going to click on the plus sign, add another action. And this is called a control. And conditions actually typically showing up always at the top because it's one of the most common steps that you'll add into these flows. It's a yes or no statement. So what are we checking for here? Well, I'm going to click on choose a value and go to dynamic content. And I want to monitor if the office location has changed. So has column changed for office, Boolean for whether this field has changed or not. So if has column changed is equal to, and I'm going to type in true, then I want to send an email to our manager. I'm going to move this step inside of the yes condition. So there's a really nice feature I like in Power Automate to copy and paste things around. You can't drag and drop these, unfortunately, but if you click on the three dots to the right of any step, you can go to copy to my clipboard up at the top. And then I will click inside of the yes condition to add an action. And when it asks me to choose an operation, you've got a My Clipboard section over here on the right. And here it is, send an email V2. So I'll select that. All right, it kind of collapsed all of my windows here, so I'm going to click back in the condition. So if yes, send an email V2, and I'm going to say new customer office updated, and I'll have their office value still showing up in there. If no, don't do anything. So if the office doesn't change, don't send a notification, and I'm going to delete the second send an email down at the bottom. Okay, so let me test this out. Save. And I know what I did wrong. I probably should have chosen the trigger at the top. Should be when an item is created or modified, because this is just going to be checking for new items, but not if I go in and modify somebody. So this is where Power Automate kind of trips me up, because if I go in and delete this trigger, it gets confused because it only sees actions at the beginning of a flow. And even though I will go back in and add a trigger, it still won't recognize that trigger as a trigger. It still thinks it's an action, and I'll get an error. So I don't know if anybody has a workaround for this, but I found I actually have to rebuild the whole thing from scratch in order when I need to update the trigger. It's really annoying. Like, I'll try it right now, but I'm pretty sure it's going to error out on me. So I want when an item is created or modified, and it's a trigger, and then I choose the site and the list. All right, and I'll go back in here because it clears out all of this data again.
You know, they try to make things so user-friendly, but then they're so unforgiving and things like that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, let's just double check this.
They're keeping out the average bears, Kurt.
All right.
Yeah, keep me out.
Craig says, I use variables to avoid that.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay, let's see. It's giving me a success. Let's see if it wants to work with me today. I'll manually go in and test something. All right, so let's say I'm going to update Xander's office, Denver. See what it does. Oh, good. Is it happy? It's happy with me.
All right.
Excellent. So if I check out the outputs here, that's what I want to see. So no. Where's the office? There we go. Has the office column changed? Yes. So if I jump down into the condition, the expression results telling me true. So this lets me know what direction we're moving with the flow if I ever need to troubleshoot things. And I think I just got an email in there.
Okay.
Yep. There it is. Okay, so back in the editing window, let's keep going with this. What if I just want a notification if the office changes to Toronto? So I only want to get notifications for people that update Toronto. I don't care if they change other locations. Let's go in to the condition. We're going to add in a second condition down here. I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to add a second row. So here under choose a value, I want to identify the office value. So as I'm looking through my parameters down here, let me do a search for office. Just be careful here. You've got office and you've got office value. So you're going to want to pick the office value parameter. That's like the text component. Okay, so I'm setting a second condition, office value equal to Toronto. Let's go ahead and save and test that one out. Always, I don't have time to do it today, but always test both. Test the true case, test the negative case to make sure that your flow is working in both scenarios. All right, so I just flipped their location to Toronto. Let's see what happens. Looks good. And if we check out the outputs, yep, so we've got a true expression. And if I scroll down here, you're going to see, yeah, the office has changed. You're also seeing things like, yes, the column change was modified, because remember that our trigger was now monitoring if an item was created or modified.
Yeah.
So let me start from scratch. I'm going to go and create an instant Cloudflow, and I'm just going to do some kind of like fun things with variables and expressions right now with some like common things that usually come up. So with the instant Cloudflow, remember that has to be activated with a button push. And so I'm just going to select manually trigger a flow as a trigger. Hit create. Okay, and so the first thing that I'm going to do, let me just call this expression and variable practice. All right, so let me initialize a variable for a date, and let's look at how we can convert dates, something kind of simple. Yeah. So I'll search for variable. And I'm going to choose the action initialize variable, but just have a look. You can initialize, you can set. I haven't played around with increment or decrement.
An array variable. That's interesting. This is good stuff.
Now you're getting excited here.
That'll be useful for like batching, I can imagine. So let me initialize this variable. I'm going to call it date input. And this is going to be a string. So the type is going to just be a regular old string here. So I'm going to use an expression now. We've been using the dynamic content so far. Let's type in an expression and get into the FX language. So I'm going to click on it. And here's where the experimental features come in handy. You see in my big window, this was like the tiniest thing before, and you had like 10 characters of space.
It was awful.
All right, so I'm just doing UTC now here. I'm going to hit save. So I'm creating a variable, and now I'm going to add in an action using the compose. So let's modify this. Let's convert the date into a format that looks good for us. That's not UTC. So I'm going to use the compose, which is a data operation.
Okay.
All right, and so under inputs, let's get back into our expression. And I'm going to use the format date time function to format UTC into Pacific Standard Time. So you've got a format date time function. I just hit tab to activate it. It doesn't do the open paren for me, which I want it to do. So I've got to insert that, and then it adds in a closed one. But you can see the arguments here. So my timestamp is going to be that variable I just initialized. To add in that variable, you go down here and click on dynamic values. This is, again, all new with the experimental features. It didn't used to be like this. And there's that, I called it date input, right? There it is, the variable date input. Okay, so I've got the timestamp, then the format that it's in currently is going to be, what's that, UTC? Let's do this, there we go. Let's do months. Okay, let me just save that. Source, time zone, destination. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've been using the compose to do that. So the base time would be our parameter, right? Source. Did I skip it? Where is it? There it is, UTC. Okay, let's look at a couple other variables. I want to get into the integer stuff. So you can also do things like, let me add in another compose. We'll keep playing with that date input for a few more examples. There's a day of the month. So you've got day of the month, day of the week, day of the year to start extracting from that date. Pull in that date input. One argument there. Yep. Day of month. And then if you want to do like the day of the week, you'll use the format date time function again. And then you'll just do your formatting DDDD. All right, so I'll just save and test some of these out. So test, let's manually test this, and then you'll hit run flow down at the bottom. So I've just created a variable, my age, I'm almost 40. Okay, and I'm going to store it as a string. Then I'm just
still a kid. Thanks,
Kurt. I've decided I should start telling people I'm 50, and then they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you look amazing for 50."
I tell everybody I'm 70, so I mean that's how it works, Yeah.
So the function that I'm using here is just the integer function. It's int. The show raw input there. Show raw output. No, it's just 3939. Okay. Yeah, so that's Craig, that's as kind of deep as I've gotten with the int, but that's what I understand is that oftentimes Power Automate puts everything in strings and then you need to convert it manually like this. Last couple functions we can use here. Let me let's do a concatenate in the sentence cases. So I'll create another variable. Called my name. Let's make it a string. It's going to be Mary. Okay. And then I'll use the compose operation to put that all in lowercase or uppercase. So that is 2 lower or 2 upper are the functions for that one. My name, there we go. Save. You could also concatenate. So I could add in another step, or I could have done it up above there. let's check out some of the integration with PowerApps and Power Automate and go deeper into Kurt and Darren's questions and figure out, when we might actually use Power Automate if it's worth it. So I'm going to jump over into PowerApps. And let me go back. I'll create another canvas. Okay, so let me create a blank app. PowerApps and Automate combined. So let's say we want to start an approval. We're building an app. We want someone to click on a button that launches an approval process over to a manager. So let me insert a button. Start an approval to Mary. Okay. So the first thing is we've got to add in the integration over here. So here's your Power Automate. I'm going to go here. So I'm going to go I'm going to create a new flow. I haven't created an approval yet. All right, so you've got a bunch of templates here that are specifically for integrating with PowerApps. So add an item to SharePoint, send to an email, click PowerApps button to create a new project in project, send approval and follow up in Teams, notify a user in Teams.
Nice.
A bunch of stuff back here. Send an adaptive card in Teams. I'm going to go to create from blank. I was running into some errors earlier today. The environment was kind of stalling out on me, but we'll see if it wants to work this time. We'll give this a name. Approval from PowerApps, let's say. Okay, and let's add in an approval. So an approval is a connector. Got this purple icon here, approvals. And let's just create an approval. And this will be, if we're sending it to a couple managers, it'll be the first one to respond with an approve or reject. Okay, and the title will be about please approve this request. I'll assign it to myself. Okay, so notice that you've got dynamic content for ask in PowerApps. So I could have like an input field in my Power App where somebody could put somebody's email address in there, and then we could connect that into the app, which I could do in a minute. Let me just do this way first. And let me just save that. And now let me update the onSelect button. So under onSelect, I'll delete the false. And I'll begin typing in the name of that flow, approval from PowerApps. Here it is, approval from PowerApps.run. And that said, I don't think there's any arguments in that one, but you can create your own arguments. So let me save this and play. In a minute, I should get an email coming in. Now I've added in my approvals center into Teams, just clicking on the 3 dots. And if you search for approvals, this just has to be enabled in your environment. I do work with some companies that haven't enabled it, and then people try and use it, doesn't work. But it was working in our Power Labs environment, which is good. So here's a request coming in through Teams and through my email. So the approval goes to both if you've got approvals enabled. Otherwise, it'll just go to your Outlook. And then here you'll see you've got more actions. They can cancel the request, follow up. They can reassign it to somebody. They can add in their comments. They can approve and reject it down below. Okay, let's go a little bit further with that app now. And this time let's use an input box. Let me insert input box. And let's just say this is going to be the approval request. I request. Okay. And so let's go back into edit my approval here. Edit. Under create an approval, instead of the title, I could put that input box as whatever someone types in is going to be the title of the request. I'll just add in the dynamic content here and search for ask in PowerApp. Save that. Okay, I think that's saved. Close out. So now I've got an error because I've now just added a parameter into that flow. If I go back into the onSelect, you can see that the run now requires an input. So now I'll connect out to my input box. So that was I request dot text. There we go. So now if I play that, I could say, please let me order pizza. Start an approval.
Someone say pizza?
I knew I'd get your attention. And here comes that request. Yes, order away. Proof. Okay. So there's connecting it with the other boxes, input boxes, controls on your screen. Let's now look at, you can actually customize the parameters inside of the Power Automate features. So if you saw the approval, they had 3 options. They could follow up, they could reassign it to somebody, or they could cancel. I can actually start customizing that adaptive card within the Power Automate approval process. To do that, I'm going to start in Power Automate this time. So create a new flow. I'll create an instant cloud flow. It's going to think PowerApps. Here we go. So I'm connecting to PowerApps. I hit create. Call this PowerApps V2. All right. So now I'm going to add in my approval here. Sorry, guys. I was teaching myself some of this earlier today. Okay, so I'm going to create an approval. Approve, reject, first to respond. Bring in the ask in PowerApps command for the title. Assign it to myself. Okay, now under advanced notifications, I can go down here and under enable reassignment, I can create a custom item that's going to say don't enable somebody to reassign this approval. So I'll go to add custom value. And here I'm going to do, I think I missed this step. Allow reassign. I go back to my other Power App I created. All right, so here we go. Click to send an approval with no reassign feature. So if I go into, so that was the PowerApps Lab run, connects to the input box, insert the title, and then false. So there's a variable set basically back here that doesn't allow the approval to be reassigned. And if I go back into my PowerApps connections, I think it was the PowerApps Lab. So let's go in and see what I did there. All right, so I used the instant connection to PowerApps, ran their approval, wait for an approval, connecting to the approval ID of the previous approval, and then down below, I've got a final step of respond to a Power App in a flow, and I've created an input for the response. So this is bringing in the outcome in here. So when I run that, oh no, what happened? There we go. Or pepperoni pizza, please. Here comes in the request. And you can see I don't get an option for a reassignment down below. The other one that I did, click to send an approval that collects data from PowerApps was the approval completed. So this one creates a local variable connecting to the automation, and it flips that variable to false. So this is the test PowerApps lab right here. So I've got the approval process going. Oh, that's the one I just showed you guys. Okay, so that's the pulling in the local variable to take data from Power Automate and put it back in Power App. The other one was the test send approval, I think. Yeah, so we're connecting to PowerApps. We're starting an approval process here. We're going back out into the app to grab the request and the email of the user that we're going to assign it to inside of the app. And then we've got the condition of if they approve it, send over an email. And this is actually, we can have the app build the email for us. So I'm referencing the app again for who's going to receive the email and also the data that's coming in from the approval. I've got all these steps written out because it took me a little bit to kind of step myself through it as I'm exploring more of the integration between Power Automate and Power Apps. But yeah, I'd love to kind of open it up to see, what are folks' thoughts. As I start learning about Power Apps, I've kind of been doing less Power Automate things because I find that I can do a lot of it without needing Power Automate.
Let's keep the conversation going in school. Thanks so much.
Guys, for some reason, YouTube thinks you're going to like this video next. Let's see if they're right. Or you can select this playlist, which I've selected for you based on the content you're currently watching. Guys, gotta hurry, click one of them. Otherwise, YouTube's going to autoplay some other video, which you probably don't want. Thanks.